Welcome everyone to Indexer Office Hours 60. Thank you all for participating today. I'm very excited to open up today's episode because we have a very exciting agenda full of protocol economics discussion. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. As I always do, I introduce the top of the episode with a GIT IQ shout out. So GIT IQ, this is podcast episode 63 with 𝗨𝗂𝗳𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗋, who is a huge figurehead in the governance space. She's quite active in the optimism community. And in this particular podcast, what I liked was her thoughts on governance and how she thinks that the Graft protocol can improve different elements of governance. So if you're interested in the governance conversation, I'd highly recommend for you to check out that particular podcast. You also have Graft Day, which is happening 2nd of June. And the good news is that all tickets are now $100. So if you've been waiting to get your ticket, now is the perfect time. I think Graft Day is going to be a fantastic opportunity to meet some of the smartest people in the Graph ecosystem, where, you know, there'll be many different talks, many different announcements, but then you also have the hackathon happening the 3rd to the 5th of June, where a lot of smart minds are going to get together and hopefully build some interesting projects. So if you haven't got your tickets, please do. So there it is. That is everything for opening remarks. I kept it really short because we have a jam-packed agenda. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Anna to take us into Repo Watch. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. And can you please confirm you can hear me properly before I start?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So welcome to our regular segment, Repo Watch. As always, links to release notes and PRs that we'll be discussing about can be found in the agenda. And before we start with major blockchain clients, I want to remind you that we've recently updated the flow a bit to only mention the clients that have had new releases. All other repos can still be found on the agenda with details on their last release, but they will not be mentioned as part of Repo Watch anymore. Another quick reminder that recently Aragon has started releasing 2 versions. So version 1 or beta versions, which are the more stable versions, and version 2 or alpha versions. On this, a reminder that if you're looking to migrate from Aragon beta versions to Aragon 1 beta versions to Aragon 2 alpha versions, you will need to sync from scratch as the data models will be incompatible. And with that, major blockchain clients. So Aragon version 2, we've had 2 new releases. So new release fresh off the press this morning, 2022-05-03 alpha. Just mostly contains fixes to performance and bug fixes. Then we've also had another release, 2022-05-02 alpha, also from Aragon. And some of the things to mention here: the maximum size of chain data database has increased to 8 terabytes. And we've had fixes for BOR. So for the BOR support bug for Polygon, and this has been confirmed to work on Mumbai testnet, and additional testing for mainnet will be conducted by the Polygon team. For streaming fast Ethereum, streaming fast Go Ethereum, we've had quite a few new releases. So we've had a BSC version 1.1.10 Firehose Ethereum block version 1. We've also had Polygon version 0.2.16 beta 0.2 Firehose Ethereum block version 1. We've also had BSC v1.1.10 Firehose Ethereum block version 2, and similarly a Polygon version 0.2.16 beta 2 Firehose Ethereum block version 2. That was a big mouthful. Just a reminder, what that means is that if you are looking to try Firehose that's running on Ethereum block version 2, those are not yet production ready. And with that, no new releases for the rest of the major blockchain clients. So does anyone have any comments regarding any of these releases, or has anyone tried them?
Sorry, Anna. I was going to mention we synced a 220502 release of Aragon 2 on Ethereum. And that got stuck during the header download stage on some particular block, whereas prior Aragon 2 alpha releases seem to sync fine. I mean, I see that in the latest O3 alpha, they have significantly simplified the header downloader and removed something called pre-verified hashes. So yeah, fingers crossed that solves that. I'll let you guys know next week.
Thank you for the update. That was a good one. Okay, anyone else? On the Graph stack, we haven't had any new releases to Graph node. Later, last release has been 0.26.0, and on indexer, service, and agent, same. No new releases. Last release has been 0.19.2. And with that, I will hand over to Protocol Watch to Juan.
Hey, I'm Protocol Watch, and this is the Juan section. Just kidding. Thanks, Anna. So I'll be covering briefly everything that's been going on in Protocol, but we'll have a special section today for Protocol economics. So we will be discussing some of these things further down the line. So without further ado, contract repository, we just have a small PR, which is a rebase of the presenting a POI when opening an allocation. There's nothing new aside from that the code is rebased to the master branch, but that's about it. Regarding network subgraphs, there's no new releases since last IOH in any of the different network subgraphs. Going into forum governance, we have a few small comments in a few of the GIPs. To start off, we have GIP 24, query versioning. There's a small comment from Zach regarding how needed the GIP itself is so that we can have query versions, but that's just about it. We also have a new GIP called the Epoch Oracle. I think this has been mentioned for a while, but we now have a formal GIP for it. It's basically an implementation that it's being implemented to try to have multi-blockchain POIs for the network. It does require a lot of different disciplines, Rust developers, also subgraph developers and stuff. So it's quite a big GIP. I recommend if you're interested in multi-blockchain POIs to take a look at it. We also have GIP 28, subsidized query settlement. There's an update to the proposal from Ariel to take into consideration all the feedback that was provided by indexers and many others. So yeah, if you were interested in the discussion, I would suggest to take a look at the new updated piece of the proposal. It should cover most of the feedback, if I'm not mistaken, but we can probably further discuss this in the later fireside chat. Going into forum research, there's also some small comments from Zach regarding principal protected bonding curves, GIP 25. So yeah, that's about it. But for Protocol Watch, does anyone have any questions? I would take that as a no, and we can go into Pinbird. We are most likely going to skip this one this time because it's just another heads up for the 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗳𝗂 backwards incompatible changes to the database storage layout with new alpha and beta versions. And that's about it. So without further ado, I'll pass on to 𝗟𝗀𝗀 for the fireside chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, as many of you are familiar, we are in the middle of a 5-part series covering the Graph R&D roadmap, where each particular session we cover several one of the 5 working groups. So in this particular episode, we're going to cover protocol economics, which, like I said at the top of the conversation, I'm very excited about. We have Juan, who's going to bring us into the conversation, and that we're going to have many participants who are going to get involved from the Edge and Node team. So Juan, without further ado, I'll hand it back to you to take us into protocol economics.
Thanks, 𝗟𝗀𝗀. So yeah, guys, I'm back for more protocol. So yeah, we are going to be covering today the working group, which is called Protocol Economics. A small introduction to Protocol Economics. It's basically a working group, a multidisciplinary working group that's focused on all of the research and development regarding mostly contract work for both the economic mechanisms as well as all the details of implementations for everything contract-wise for the protocol. But it's also heavily impacted by the research side of things, which we have Brandon, for example, and some other groups, for example, Prism and Block Science, which work on doing some research, key areas of research on economic side of things. So without further ado, I'm going to be presenting everyone that's going to take part in the discussion. We have Ariel, which, as many of you know, is the main contract developer for the Graph. He's the one who basically created each and every one of the contracts that we had to then read and understand. Then we also have Pablo, which is a new arrival for the contract side of things. He's working heavily on auto scaling, which we will be discussing today. I don't know if Brandon is here. I think he's not. But I'm also here, which I'm part of the Protocol Economics working group. As many of you know, I am a subgraph developer mainly, but I am incursioning a little bit in contract work, in smart contract development. So I'm also taking part in the research and development of the Protocol Economics. Getting into the main topics for Protocol Economics, we will be covering some key areas that we are basically researching and development. One of those areas is what I personally call protocol improvements. This has everything to do with the economic mechanisms and how the protocol works. Some of the areas that this impacts are, for example, indexer, curation, delegation, and subgraph developer improvements. These are all participants that we can distinguish from each other. But of course, these mechanisms, as many of you know, are intertwined. So there are a lot of different areas and different GIPs that we'll be touching on these protocol improvements. But it's a clear distinction from, for example, some of the other things that we are also taking into consideration, which are L2 scaling, which is a huge undertaking, and also all the work being done for protocol simulations. Without further ado, I'll be talking about a few of the GIPs that are considered here. I think one of the most interesting for all of the indexers would be the query fee, subsidized query fee settlement, if I'm not mistaken, GIP 28. There were a few changes in the proposal. I don't know if you want to cover them now, Ariel?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, right?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, subsidized query settlement. This GIP I posted on the forum like a few weeks ago. Received quite a number of comments and feedback from the community. Particularly, I would say the two main things were related to. Let me step back. Like the GIP proposed tying the indexing rewards to the query fees collection, right? Like completing the full life cycle of an allocation and getting the subsidy of the indexing rewards to cover all the actions related to the allocation. So the one thing that the community posted as feedback is that the query fees can be, the query fees can change based on the indexer selection algorithm, and an indexer might not receive any query fees for many different reasons. And they won't be able to collect the indexing rewards. So in a way, they would be tied. The indexing rewards mechanisms will be tied to whatever the gateway is doing on the indexer selection algorithm. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, like, let's say we have a very an early subgraph that is new. Indexers maybe would be waiting for start indexing this subgraph, because they don't maybe know if it's going to receive queries. Maybe it will take some time for them to receive, for the subgraph to receive queries. So they will be holding off the decision of indexing because they won't be able to collect indexing rewards. So very, very valid observations. What I posted in the forum is like a change to the original GAP that allows indexers to self-sign an empty voucher. I guess most of you know that indexers collect vouchers given by the gateway with query fees, and then they redeem it on the allocation exchange contract back to the staking contract. So the idea is that if they haven't received any voucher with query fees, they will be able to self-sign the empty voucher and signal the staking contract that they did the work of going through the whole process of trying to collect the query fees. And if it's not positive, if they don't get any voucher from the gateway, they can self-sign and collect the indexing rewards. But they will be doing the full cycle. They will be sending the transaction to collect. They will be calling redeem from the rebate pool, and that's the moment they will get back the indexing rewards. So it's the same process for every indexer, even if they have or not query fees. But they have this way to avoid any type of, let's say, censorship by the gateway or any other entities by self-signing a voucher. So that's the main change. And in the JPA, I published the different items that we need to do to implement the change.
That is super cool. Yeah,
Any questions so far? Is it clear?
I think this is just a side note. I don't want to interrupt, but one of the things that I think was the most important, aside from the fact that, of course, not having query fees would prohibit you from getting indexing rewards, which is not something that was intended in the original GAP. I think the point that Chris made a few weeks ago regarding the centralization factor of the gateway and how it could potentially censor and become like a huge issue, it's very well. It's a really decent feedback, and I think it was in this new proposal it's solved in an elegant fashion. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, the idea is to keep the same interfaces to make everything work the same way, but you self-sign an empty voucher and you remove any type of any type of issues by the vouchers given by the gateway. It can be anything. When we talk about centralization or censorship, is maybe we are thinking about someone bad, someone that wants to do a bad thing, but the reality is anything can happen, right? It could be a bug, it could be the indexer selection algorithm doing something that, I don't know, we didn't expect. So this by having a way to sign an empty voucher, you are signaling that, yeah, you're going through the full life cycle of doing all the actions required by an allocation, but you have a way to to escape from any type of issues with the happy path of collecting the voucher with query fees.
Totally. Does anyone have any questions regarding this new improvement proposal?
I invite you to read it on the forum. It's the GAP number 28, and provide any comments or feedback. Particularly maybe some of the indexers that commented on the original one.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. There's no questions for it. On this like side of protocol economics working group, which is the what I call protocol improvements, we can also take into consideration a few other GIPs that are currently there, or at least in a proposal stage. Some of these are, for example, the stake rebates, which I would like to have Brandon to discuss, but unfortunately he's not here. So yeah. There's also there was the state allocation management or state allocation proposal, which I think was made from by Sam. Which also I think there's also a PR open for it. I don't know if it has been.
Yeah, I can update on that. There's a change, a GAP and a PR for something called altruistic allocations and stale allocations. The idea is to make it easy, the process of anyone closing allocations that were open for more than 28 days. And that's one of the change. But the other main change is that you can, as an indexer, you can allocate 0 tokens to a subgraph. And this way lets you index a subgraph, opting out of indexing rewards, and making it much cheaper if you decide to do that. Like if you want to, let's say, yeah, I want to support this subgraph. I don't want to. I'm not really interested in indexing rewards. You can like allocate 0 tokens on that subgraph, and the process of doing that will be much cheaper because we are skipping some path that requires recalculating the rewards. So it's going to be more like gas efficient, and it's going to be like a new feature for the protocol. Like it will be easier to for altruistic like indexers to index a subgraph. So that's the main change of this GAP. It's already audited, and it's there for comment in the forums, and probably it's going to be presented to the council eventually. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's that controversial at all. It's actually like a smaller version of the original proposal because it wasn't a GAP back in the day, and I think it's a quite interesting way to make altruistic behaviors a little bit more easy to reproduce. I know P2P had the, I think, pillar altruistic indexer or something, and there's also the backstop indexers from Edge and Node, I think. Which will be greatly benefited from this without having any dire consequences of the state allocation mechanism, or rather the easier access to killing state allocations, I guess would be the wording for it. Because the proposal itself also makes it easier to basically close third-party allocations that have gone over 28 days, which makes total sense since the previous behavior would be that you need to be a delegator, and this just gets rid of that extra stage. But at the same time, it makes sure that altruistic allocations are not going to be affected as long as they are being properly managed, I guess, or created with zero GRT, right? Cool. So we can go next with some of the curation improvements. I'm quite familiar with them because I've been greatly involved in the curation improvement process. There are a lot of curation improvements. I don't want to like take over the whole 30 minutes that we have left with curation improvements, although I could because there's a lot of curation improvements on the current workflow. But I would like to briefly mention them since they are quite important. The curation community has been one of the most relegated parts of the initial, I guess, launch. They were the ones to come later because we needed to make sure that everything was working correctly, and also the current, at least in my perspective, the current way that the bonding curves work is not the ideal way that they should work. So without further ado, like one of the main improvements that are being developed for curators is the new concept of principal protected bonding curves. We have discussed this for a long time because they have been in the work for a long time. But the main idea, and I want to summarize this without taking that much time, the main idea is to make sure that we have the bonding curve, the good things that we like from the bonding curves, which are the basically discovery incentive mechanisms. So if you get into the bonding curve early, you get a lot more shares. So ideally, you get a lot more of the query fees that the subgraph is going to be generating in the future. So it's basically like a bet that the subgraph will be generating a lot of traffic, which makes sense from like the incentive. The incentive alignment is kind of like where you would expect it to be. That if you bet correctly in a subgraph and it creates a lot of volume and it generates a lot of volume, you will be getting a lot of revenue out of it. That's the nice part of it. But there were a few like not so nice properties of bonding curves, which is basically everything that has to do with the burning side of things of the shares, which is how you redeem the from one point this is how you redeem your royalties and also how you get like capital gains because of how the bonding curves interact. Basically, principal protected bonding curves make sure that the burning side of things will always get you your base capital. So everything that you input it in, you will always guarantee you will always get it back, as well as all of the royalties. There's also like a further improvement of this new principal protected bonding curves where you could get royalties out without having to burn your shares. That would be ideal. That's not in the like MVP of the principal protected bonding curves, but that's a further improvement that we also have thought for it. And there's also like a few other like different approaches to the principal protected bonding curves, like make sure that all of the bonding curves are principal protected or maybe not, depending on the type of like user base that we want to cater to. If we want like financially motivated curators from like a capital gains perspective, or if we want some different kind of secondary markets for those capital financially motivated curators. There are like a bunch of things that we are discussing in the design space for this, but like that's one of the main curation improvements that we're thinking, which would basically decrease the risk of curation like by basically infinite because it's zero risk once principal protected bonding curves are there. But there are also other possible improvements that would mitigate the way that bonding curves work right now, with like initialization phase or decaying capital gain stacks. But yeah, those are like the main, I guess, curation and also subgraph developer improvements, because subgraph developers are also inside the protocol are kind of like taken into consideration as curators because they want their subgraphs indexed, so they have to curate so that indexers can get the signal that those subgraphs are there for indexing. These changes also would impact indexers in a way, if you will, because they should make signaling more stable. There should not be that many casino games or volatility in the signal that kind of like makes indexers life a little bit more difficult when trying to choose between different subgraphs to index. I don't know if this is a particular issue right now in the more of like steady state network that's going on right now. But I remember like trying to pick subgraph back in the day when Curation just launched was slightly more difficult than you would expect because there weren't that stable. Most of the subgraphs were actually quite volatile, so it was quite difficult to optimize for your allocations. But I think these changes should also go a long way in making sure that curation signal is more stable, and like even if you have changes, they should all be for the better and less volatile than they were before. Does anyone have any questions regarding this section? I'm gonna take that as a no and keep going. So we also have delegation improvements. These ones I'll just briefly mention. They are I don't think they are like being worked heavily right now because we're mostly working with L2 scaling and curation improvements. But there's also like a lot of discussions about how to improve the delegation side of things, like, for example, instant redelegation, which is something that was requested a long time ago. Maybe changing the in and out curves, the way that you get into a delegation pool and out of the delegation pool, improving the delegation efficiency, and batch delegations, for example, which, like, delegating to multiple indexers right now is way too costly. Making it like a batch operation would totally make sense in those cases. But now
I can say
yeah.
something. Yeah, about multiple delegation. There's one of the upgrades of the staking contract. We added the multi-call. Multi-call is a transaction that you can batch multiple different operations related to the same contract. So the protocol, as it is today, supports delegating multiple delegators at the same time, because you can create a multi-call with a delegate call to multiple. With a delegate function transaction to multiple indexers. The only thing is it's not supported in the UI yet, but anyone that is interacting through any other like UI could craft a transaction to do it a multiple delegation. Even if there's some contract that is integrating with the seeking contract, can do it. So I hope we can have something like that soon in the UI.
Yeah, that's super cool. Cool. So moving forward with this, does anyone have any questions about the protocol improvements as a whole? Maybe the index improvements, curation improvements, whatever. Okay, I'll take that as a no. And without further ado, the cherry on top, I guess, would be L2 scaling, which I think is something that has been discussed for a while. It's something that, as anyone that's been interacting with L1 for a while, especially during this bull run, L1 has become quite expensive in the last few years. And of course, the Graft protocol is working on L1, but we have actively been trying to come up with L2 solutions. And we have Ariel and Pablo today, which are the two main developers that are working on making sure that we can scale with an L2. We've had a few different ideas on how to scale with L2s. And I think they can probably put it best. One of the current GIPs for L2 scaling is the Arbitrum bridge, Arbitrum GRT bridge, which is a custom bridge for Arbitrum. But I guess both Ariel and Pablo can better describe it than I would be able to. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can go ahead with that. It's great to be here. So we've been discussing all of these options for L2, and there's a lot of challenges in how we can go ahead with that. Do we want to split the protocol in some way where parts of it run in L1, others run in L2? And after a lot of discussions, it seems like the most straightforward and probably the safer approach is simply to deploy the whole protocol to L2 and try it out there while keeping the protocol in L1 still running and functional. So this kind of evolved into the idea of a sort of DevNet in L2 that is kind of equivalent to what we currently have in L1, just maybe at first having indexing rewards disabled because it's going to be more for experimental stuff, experimental subgraphs that wouldn't be supported in L1 right now. So the first step for doing anything like that would be to have a way to actually move the GRT to the L1 of our choice. And I mean, we're not completely married to any L2 yet, but it seems like Arbitrum would be the more straightforward choice. I guess that's the rough consensus that we've picked up from all of the conversations that we've had. It's the safest choice, the more popular one, and the one with the biggest TVL, and the one that has the more mature fraud proof, at least from what we could tell for now. So considering all of this, we've been working on this bridge implementation that is kind of the default bridge that you get when you want to move assets between Ethereum and Arbitrum. But it gives governance a way to kind of react if something goes terribly wrong, either with Arbitrum or with the bridge itself, because governance can update or pause that bridge in the case of something critical going wrong. And we can also update so that when we deploy these new features for the DevNet, then if there are any changes that are needed in the bridge itself, then we can deploy them together with that. So that's kind of GIP 31 in a nutshell. There's nothing particularly special about the implementation of the bridge, other than it's based on Arbitrum's default base implementation that they provide, and also based in what the LivePeer folks did, because they did a sort of similar thing, but they just completely moved the protocol to L2 rather than having this dual L1 plus L2 setup for a while, which is the approach that it seems we might want to take. I don't know if so far so good, if there's any questions or any comments on this.
Does anyone have any questions? I think yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious, does this also involve setting up some sort of a beacon or something to synchronize time across all the different chains that we're going to be working on?
That's a great question. So right now, I think there might be some work with regards to that, and that is the Epoch Oracle when we're talking about multiple chains that are indexed. When we're talking about the multiple layers that we're running the protocol on, that's kind of a different problem in that each protocol running on each layer will have its own sense of time, and how much do we need to synchronize between the two? And that is the next part of what we're working on. Actually, my focus this past 2 weeks, since we put up that GIP 31, has been how do we actually design this DevNet and the interaction between what we have, the protocol on L1 and the protocol on L2, so that they are synchronized or synchronized enough for things to work smoothly. And the main thing there, from what I've seen so far, is how do we synchronize rewards, issuance, and distribution? And that's going to be probably the biggest challenge. That is, there is an issuance rate that we have, and that issuance rate is tokens that are minted in L1 to pay the indexer rewards, and then those tokens need to be sent to L2, and then on L2 we need to distribute them according to that same formula, so that we can make sure that whatever we minted in L1 is enough to pay for what we have to reward in L2. So that's kind of my current area of focus. It seems that we don't need anything too special to synchronize the two. So we can have the Epoch Manager contract running on the 2 layers, and the block number on L2 is sort of reflective of the block number in L1. It can only lag behind a little bit if the Arbitrum sequencer is a bit slower to synchronize them. But in the worst case, that protocol running on L2 would be kind of lagging behind a little bit by, say, 10 minutes, and in the worst case, 24 hours behind what's running on L1. I don't know if this answers your question, Kai.
Yeah, it does. So it sounds to me like we're going to rely on whatever we have available on whichever network we choose, and use that as sort of our time marker, and that we're going to run a contract to keep track of the time element on our chosen L2. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, that's correct. With the only addition, I would say that we're going to rely on the L2 having a native way to synchronize, at least closely enough, the block numbers from L1 into L2. So that the time we keep on L2, it's going to be kept independently, but it's going to be kept by following what the L2 says about the time in L1.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
It's super interesting, all the challenges that you get when you're trying to make, because this is not just a simple upgrade, kind of like, well, I think all of the upgrades that we've done so far are never simple upgrades. I remember when we had to deploy the SAGRAPH NFT feature. If I recall correctly, Ariel, we were basically thinking of that upgrade as a sort of like changing your engine of a plane while you're basically traveling like 800 kilometers per hour in the middle of the Pacific. And it's scary because state migration is difficult. In this case, it seems to be even extra difficult because you have to be able to have two different protocols. Well, this maybe the same contracts, but in two different places, have them sort of like synchronized, have one depend on the other. So there are many different places where it could fail. But it seems as we are taking a path so that everything in L2 has like, even in a critical error, in like a critical situation where everything goes wrong with L2, maybe the whole of the whole arbitrum goes down or something, there's always a way to recover the state sort of into the L1, so that we can make sure that even if L2 is lost, the L1 state can be recovered, the L2 state can be recovered onto L1 in a way that makes sense and no one loses anything, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, Pablo.
No, go ahead, Ariel.
No, I was going to say, like, add something to what Juan was saying about the challenge. We are seeing the first applications being deployed on L2s. Like, L2s are something I would say quite new. They are mainnets. They're still in beta in a way, but they are mainnet since last year. Most of the projects that are being deployed there are like DeFi applications. DeFi applications they have some one advantage, that they can be deployed as a single, like as a standalone product in a different chain. So if you have Aave on mainnet, you can deploy Aave on the EL2, and it's a standalone application. Anyone can use it and start from scratch using the EL2 on Arbitrum, the Aave on Arbitrum, I mean. But the main issue that they have is that the liquidity, they need to start the liquidity from scratch, right? They need to get deposits and people borrowing from DL2 as a different application. In our case, deploying the protocol means deploying like a set of deploying a new network, right? Like we have a number of off-chain components that reads the state so they can coordinate. So if we have something deployed on L2, it's sort of working as a different like network that we can mask. Let's say we can mask the coordination complexities by using subgraphs maybe, but in a way people will interact in this L2 with the as a different thing. Like they will stake there. You will need to allocate there. There will be subgraphs that will be deployed on the L2. Some of them will remain on L1. So that's make things a bit complex. The idea is after we deploy this DevNet to explore and learn from having the deployments in two places, like a deployment in mainnet and DL2, and eventually working on migration tools to help moving over state from the different like stakeholders. Let's say move delegation from an indexer from L1 to L2, or move your stake there from L1 to L2. That's the idea. But some state will be challenging to move. There are some complexities in the mechanisms, particularly in curation, that will be a bit tricky, but that's something that we'll be working on after having a strong and working bridge deployed, and after we have a similar like protocol working on L2, like the one we have on mainnet. Pablo, you wanted to say something?
That's good. Yeah, I was just adding on or kind of replying to Juan's comments on us being able to recover in the case of something going wrong on the L2. So the nice thing about optimistic L2s is that all of the state from the L2 is visible on L1. So even if Arbitrum completely disappeared from one day to the next, we still have all of the state there. You can look at the Ethereum chain and you can make out what was going on the L2 up to the moment when it disappeared. So we could, in theory, and like we're kind of prepared to do this in the absolute worst case, take the tokens that are in the escrow from the bridge and provide a sort of Merkle root of that state in L2 so that someone can recover their funds by proving that they had the appropriate funds in L2. So there is that possibility, and there is a concrete path how we could react to a scenario like that.
Sounds super cool. And I also love the comparison with like regular DeFi projects, that you can just spin up a new deployment on a different chain, and your main, like, I guess your main difficulty would be trying to get liquidity there. So basically it's liquidity fragmentation across multiple chains. In our case, it seems that the explanation that Ariel laid out, it's pretty clear that we need to make sure of a lot of other things aside from like fragmentation in the GRT allocations. You also need to make sure that there's like a big picture of everything that's going on in the network. And if you have two different networks, it's quite tricky to be doing that. So yeah, for sure, it's a complete challenge to make the L2 scaling solution to be easily migratable and also easily recoverable. But thankfully, there's a lot of work being done, so that's super cool. Does anyone have any questions about the L2 scaling solutions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. I do have one question, which I guess would be in the case of Arbitrum, right? Why we picked Arbitrum? Aside from the obvious, at least obvious for me, but like maybe not for others, the easy compatibility with EVM code. So basically, you can deploy your Solidity code there. Were there any other reasons, or was just that one the primary reason, or something?
About EVM compatible chains, there are optimistic rollups. There are two, Optimism and Arbitrum, and for the reasons that Pablo mentioned, particularly when we started the investigation, the fraud-proof system was Arbitrum had a working fraud-proof system. We saw that the Arbitrum was gaining some steam in usage, like TVL, and it was we started some tests with Arbitrum, and everything seems to work pretty well in terms of compatibility and tooling. So let's say I would say Arbitrum and Optimism are with the days are looking more and more similar, and we'll see how they will differentiate. But they seem to borrow each other from concepts from the other ones, from each other. So, but you need to start from someone, from some chain. Like it's like I mean, Optimism could have been a good option too, but you need to go and move forward with some. And at the time we did the research, Arbitrum was a good option, and I think it still is. I would say that the main, I would say if we were considering something like different, that is not an optimistic rollup, we will be looking into maybe CK rollups, but they are still like early, I would say. They are launching their mainnet now, and they are still in alpha, and it requires porting all the features and all the contracts to, let's say, if you startnet to Cairo or something different. So for us, considering that the Ethereum gas costs were going up pretty fast, we found in Arbitrum something that like easy to port our current features, and something that we could deploy in the, let's say, medium term, or maybe short to medium term. Maybe a third choice would be to consider an app chain, like that's another option. Like maybe creating your own application using a Tendermint or like a complete different things with the indexers, maybe running nodes and the nodes running the logic of the chain, right? That's another option, and that's my gain as a lot of flexibility in the things we can do, and also like cost reduction. But at the same time, it's a longer term path. Like it will require some more time, and it's also something that requires some engineering efforts. Like running your own chain is not that easy.
Makes sense, yeah.
So yeah.
And it also seems, this is pure speculation from my side, but it would seem that given the heavy research being done in how to recover the state from L2 if there were to be some catastrophic failures, I think this also means that we are not shooting ourselves in the foot just by picking one L2 right now, because we could at a longer term kind of like solution, we could choose to stop the L2, the current Arbitrum or whatever optimism, whatever we end up choosing. We could probably just shut it down, recover the state, and move to a different longer term solution if let's say in 3 or 4 years maybe the gas cost on L2 on that particular L2 become prohibitively expensive, right?
Yeah, this is evolving super fast. So it doesn't mean that we are we are doing this like the L2 work is not finishing here. It's not that we deploy on let's say on Arbitrum, the DevNet, and eventually something that migrates more of the state back to the from L1 to L2. It doesn't end there, because the platform, the network is also changing. We can see more and more volume. We are now in the hundreds of subgraphs in the network. Maybe soon would be thousands, but maybe in a few years it's 10 of I don't know, thousands. And in a way, it makes you think about any type of maybe redesign in the future that we need to do to scale more. And so yeah, for sure, I think we'll keep considering the different options, and there are many other things that I'm super interested in CK rollups, and they are still evolving. And I think if they eventually work and get stable, it will be amazing because of all the benefits they bring. But yeah, it's a matter of effort and time to get there.
Totally.
The good thing is that once we know how to run this sort of multi-layer protocol, extending that from 2 to n is, I'm not going to say trivial, but it's a lot easier. And obviously we don't want all of the liquidity and the token and the whole network behavior fragmented too much. But once we know how to deploy to a new network, to a new layer, then we can deploy to another one and find mechanisms to migrate state from one to the other. So this learning exercise of deploying the DevNet to Arbitrum gives us an easier path in the future to deploy to anything else.
Totally. Does anyone have any further questions? We're almost at the top of the hour, but I just want to open up. Okay, I'll take that as a no, and I'll pass on to you, Abel, for the closing remarks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I can certainly say that I learned a lot in that conversation. I have a newfound appreciation for how complex our protocol is relative to, like you guys mentioned, other DeFi protocols, and how, it's not as trivial to kind of deploy the graph onto another network. So I appreciate all of the work and effort that's going into thinking about all of these different upgrades to the protocol from an economics perspective, and just very excited to see what the future holds. So thank you all for participating in that fireside chat, and thank you all for having a listen. So I'm going to wrap up with the POAP as we always do. This secret word is quite funny because of what happened last week, where everyone was quite excited to get the POAP. So the secret word for this week is IOH POAP FOMO. That's all capital letters. IOH POAP FOMO. I felt like there was a lot of FOMO last week because that was such a juicy episode from Zach. Everyone wanted to get the POAP there. So yeah, that is it. If you guys have trouble, of course, redeeming that POAP, let me know. But again, it's IOH POAP FOMO. That's all capital letters. Thank you all for participating in today's IOH. I learned a crap ton. So just very much grateful to all of you for today's show. Great. Well, I'll hope to see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Yes.